Hi everybody, my name is Josh Flores and I'm the Director of Secondary English Language Arts in the Office of Instruction at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And today's workshop is going to talk about the ingredients that go into creating, or should I say cooking up, expository, narrative, and persuasive argumentative writings. We're about to get dirty, so we should probably put on our aprons. And now let's get out our cookbook and talk about ingredients. You'll notice at the bottom of the page there should be somewhere located on the website a handout that you can download and print off with various resources and articles that we're going to discuss today. It is called the Right Ingredients Handouts. Appropriate enough, right? You might just peruse the one-pager available at elaokteachers.com and do a search for one-pager. It should come right up, and it covers all the general information about the upcoming writing assessments. Let's just talk about two main rules for teaching writing. Rule number one, can we all agree that learning happens in a crock pot, not a microwave? So essentially, we should be teaching writing, at the beginning of the year? And I got some strategies, just some suggestions of what should be taught in the 6th grade in order to help prepare students for that 8th grade test. Rule number two, no matter what advice you're getting, always remember that your recipes or lessons should reflect your own personal taste and that of your students. So feel free to take whatever we talk about today and adjust it to their needs and interests. Now, let's talk about handling raw materials safely. Opening up to page 4, you'll notice we have some raw writing prompts. These are just the prompts taken from different sources. The first page on page 4, these are the prompts available at the Oklahoma State Department of Education Assessment Materials page. The second page are the prompts, the excellent writing prompts from Middale Public Schools right here in Oklahoma. It's important for students to understand the prompts, so they need to actually spend some time dissecting those prompts, looking at all the ingredients that go into the prompt itself. Essentially, there are 4 main ingredients in a writing prompt itself. Let's crack them open and take a closer look. We got our mode, which really communicates what specific writing mode is the student being asked to use when writing their response. We have the task, which includes that important main verb, which also gives a clarification on the structure in which to address the mode. And of course the context, which is just the setup. How are you... Drop one of my ingredients on the floor. 3-second rule. Okay, it's fine, it's fine. So the context, which just tells a student how they're presenting their writing. If you're making a cake, well, what's the context that you're making that cake? Is it a birthday party? Is it a New Year's Eve party? Maybe it's just a cake because, I don't know, you're celebrating because you got an A on your writing assessment. And of course, specifications. Sometimes the writing prompts will have very specific requirements that are listed out that the students can ignore. And the student needs to know how to look for these 4 items in a writing prompt. So we're going to practice that with this first prompt that is in your guidebook. It's a narrative. Well, you know it's a narrative because it has the mode addressed right off the beginning. Write a narrative. The task follows it. That describes, there's our good verb, so we know that it's going to be very descriptive, filled narratives. And the context, wrapping, if you will, is that it's going to be the experience of someone who is an early traveler on the Transcontinental Railroad. But what if we're not familiar with the Transcontinental Railroad? Well, just like all good authors, we're going to go do some research taken from 2 specific passages. And the specifications that we must include, 1, a description of the railroad line, and 2, the character's feelings about traveling on the line. So that gives us some things to infer. First off, we need a character, and they have to be on the railroad. They can't just be someone seeing the railroad go by, and they have some feelers about that, right? And then, of course, use information from both passages. And if we're not familiar with the Transcontinental Railroad, you might have students that have never been on a railroad, so this is their opportunity to at least do some research about it. And we'll talk more about, well, recipes for reading later on. Turn to an elbow partner and decide, well, what part of this prompt is the mode, which part is the context, which part is the task, and which part is the specification. Got ingredients all over the floor now. Luckily, I'm the chef, so I don't have to clean the kitchen, right? Unless I'm at home. Then my wife always makes me clean the dishes. Of course, you can practice with those other prompts and actually have students practice with those other prompts. They might even create a bullet point list somewhere so that they can go back and check off, did I hit every part on this checklist? For instance, for that narrative prompt, I would say, is it a story? Is my character on the railroad? Do they share their emotions? And does it describe the railroad from their perspective? And then, of course, does it use info from both passages? Did I include at least all these 5 elements? Yes, 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 yes. Oh, no, let me go back and rewrite that so I can include more information from both paragraphs. Now let's talk about handling raw rubrics. This is something students also need to spend time doing. They need to look at the rubric that they will be graded on, and I have the ingredients to the raw rubric right here. There are 5 main ingredients to our state rubric. The interesting thing about these is that they are all of different weights. Not necessarily values, but they're just of different weights. Another interesting aspect about this is that if you look closely at the rubric, you may notice that for all 3 writing modes that are assessed, word choice, grammar usage and mechanics, and sentence and paragraphs, exactly the same on the rubric. They also hold the same weight. It would make sense for us, if we're just focusing on the writing modes, that we focus on ideas and development and organization, unity, and coherence with our students, especially if you're an 8th grade teacher. And in the 6th grade, if you're doing some vertical alignment within your district, it might be a good idea for 6th grade teachers to focus on using that word choice, grammar usage and mechanics, and sentence and paragraphs aspect of the rubric for their daily writing. That way, when students get to the 8th grade, where they're going to be assessed on writing, hey, luckily they're already experts at word choice, grammar usage and mechanics, and sentence and paragraphs. Now we just got to work with them on ideas and development and organization, unity, and coherence on day 1. Remember, crock pot, not microwave. So let's look at ideas and development. Looking at the rubric, that's a lot to take in for a student. We want to spend time prior to testing and maybe make some adjustments here, put it in student-friendly language. So taking ideas and development, we're going to look at it here and just bold out or pick out the really important skill words that we want students to be familiar with. It almost creates a vocab shopping list of sorts. Let's look at that first bullet point. The content is appropriate for audience and purpose. That's the one thing that's the same clear across all writing modes. So naturally, in our classrooms, we want to do some sort of activities that focus on audience and purpose and repeat that whenever we're teaching any of the writing modes. Let's look at bullet point 2. The writer addresses the prompt with a fully developed, that's where the similarities stop for persuasive, argumentative, and expository. It's way different for narrative, but let's just focus on persuasive, argumentative, and expository. The argument needs to be fully developed by using claims, counterclaims, and text-based evidence and reasoning. Those are the words that I would focus on with my students, give them that academic vocabulary so they know what they're looking for whenever we're reading persuasive argumentative essays in class. If they're able to recognize that in the articles that we're reading in class, then they can imitate it in their own writing. Likewise, when they're reading expository, explanatory, informational essays in class, they need to be able to recognize the topic and facts, definitions, details, quotations, or examples that go along with that topic. In narrative, a story with a narrator, characters, and details. Bullet point number 3, quotes and phrases for expository and persuasive argumentative. To be able to recognize when a professional writer appropriately uses quotes and paraphrases evidence from different research, and then of course imitate that style in their own writing. And we'll talk more about recipes for quoting and paraphrasing and summarizing later on in this module. And then in the narrative, we focus on context and point of view. The spice rack for narrative techniques is abundant. They can choose based on what's appropriate for whatever story they're writing. So when we go through the rubric and highlight important skill words or verbs, we can come up with our own checklist of things to go over that a student needs to be familiar with, and even identifying in other professional essays. And it's a checklist that they can adhere to when they are composing their own persuasive, argumentative writing, expository, or narrative. Let's do the same thing with organization, unity, and coherence now. Going through circling, underlining, or highlighting those really important skill words that you would want students to be able to recognize in professional writing and be able to do when conducting their own writing? I'll wait.